My name is Lucas Bennett, a 42-year-old mechanic who spent most of his life fixing cars and keeping to himself. I drive a beat-up Chevy pickup, live in a modest ranch-style house, and find peace tinkering in my backyard workshop, where the hum of tools and the smell of motor oil are my therapy. For years, my evenings were spent under the glow of a work lamp, restoring an old Mustang my dad left me. But when HOA President Claudia Ramsey decided my backyard projects were an eyesore and hit me with a $400 fine for unauthorized structures, she had no clue. She just lit a fuse. What she didn't know was that my property wasn't just another lot in Pinewood Hills. It came with a secret that gave me leverage she couldn't imagine. I was about to show her and the entire HOA what happens when you push a quiet man too far. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on the most controlling HOA in town, I want to know, have you ever been backed into a corner by someone who thought they held all the cards? That's where I was, and by the end of this, you'll see why sometimes the underdog bites hardest. I bought my house 15 years ago from an old family friend, George Miller, a retired welder who'd owned the land since the 1970s. George was a tinkerer like me, and he'd built a small workshop in the backyard, a sturdy shed where he'd weld, grind, and rebuild anything with an engine. When he passed, he left me the place cheap, knowing I'd carry on his love for fixing things. The house isn't much to look at. A single story with faded brick and a patchy lawn I never bothered to manicure. But the backyard? That's my kingdom. The workshop sits at the far end, surrounded by a chain-link fence, with tools organized like a surgeon's tray. Beyond it, a narrow strip of land runs to a creek that cuts through the neighborhood, a spot I'd turned into a gravel path for hauling parts. After a rough divorce 5 years back, when my ex, Rachel, took our savings and moved to Nevada, that workshop became my escape. I'd spend hours there, wrench in hand, piecing together the Mustang while the creek babbled nearby. It wasn't just a hobby, it was how I kept my head straight. That peace shattered when Pinewood Hills started growing around me. In 2018, a developer called Summit Homes bought up the nearby lots, turning farmland into rows of cookie-cutter houses with pristine lawns and solar panels. The new folks were tech workers and finance types, people who'd rather post about their suburban oasis than get their hands dirty. I didn't mind them at first. I'd nod at dog walkers, ignore their noisy leaf blowers, even helped a neighbor jumpstart his Tesla once. But they looked at my greasy coveralls and cluttered yard like I was a stain on their perfect picture. Complaints started small. Someone griped to the county about my messy driveway. Another suggested I paint my workshop to blend in. I shrugged it off. This was George's land, and I wasn't about to turn it into a showpiece for strangers. Then Claudia Ramsey moved in, buying the biggest house on the block in 2022, a glassy monstrosity with a fountain out front. Late 40s, with a polished bob and a smile sharp enough to cut steel, she drove a black Lexus with plates reading Lead 1. Within weeks, she'd rallied the neighborhood into an HOA, complete with rules about fence heights, paint colors, and approved landscaping. Elected president without a fight, she claimed her real estate background made her the expert on preserving property values. My trouble began one October evening as I welded a new exhaust for the Mustang. Claudia's heels crunched up my driveway, her tablet glowing with purpose. "Mr. Bennett," she said, voice sugary but cold. "We need to talk about your backyard." I wiped my hands, keeping calm. "What about it, Claudia?" She pointed to my workshop. "That shed is an unapproved structure, and your activities grinding, welding are disturbing residents. It's not in line with Pinewood Hills aesthetic standards." I laughed, thinking she was joking. "It's my property, and I've been working here for years. No one's complained." Her smile tightened. "Things change, Lucas. The HOA has standards now. Your shed needs approval, and nighttime noise is unacceptable." She handed me a notice citing non-compliant structures and excessive noise, warning of fines. I dug into my property records that night, expecting to find nothing but curious about Claudia's confidence. What I found was a bombshell. George hadn't just owned the house and yard, he'd bought the creek and a 50-foot easement along its banks, running through half the neighborhood's backyards. The HOA thought the creek was public land, but it was mine, along with rights to control access and use. Better yet, the easements allowed public crossing but could be revoked with a 60-day notice. Claudia's community standards had no hold over my land, and her precious neighborhood depended on my creek for drainage and appeal. I tried to play nice first. For a month, I kept my workshop lights off after 7 p.m., working in daylight despite the inconvenience. The Mustang sat untouched, and the joy of tinkering faded under the hum of neighbors' sprinklers. I thought Claudia would back off. Instead, she doubled down. One Friday, I came home to find a neon orange violation sign staked in my front yard, listing unapproved structure and disruptive activities, with a $400 fine. Then, at a neighborhood barbecue I didn't attend, Claudia paraded around with photos of my workshop, calling it a blight. Neighbors I'd never met started whispering, their phones snapping pictures of my fence. Fury burned through me, but George's voice in my head steady. Practical kept me focused. I called a lawyer, Emily Torres, who specialized in property disputes. Her eyes lit up as she read my deed. Lucas, you don't just own your yard, you own the creek that makes this neighborhood valuable. You could shut down access and tank their property values. We planned a counterstrike. First, a letter voiding the fines, citing my property rights. Then, if Claudia pushed further, I'd revoke the creek easements. I filed the paperwork, ordered private property, no access signs, and sent Claudia a certified letter. You fined me illegally, trespassed to shame me, and slandered my home. In 60 days, I'm revoking all creek access. Your community asset is my property. The signs went up Monday. By Tuesday, neighbors were at my door, yelling about blocked paths and flooded yards. Claudia left voicemails, threatening lawsuits. I let them stew. The fallout was chaos. Without creek access, backyards flooded, and the neighborhood's natural charm vanished. 5 homes hit the market. Realtors called it a crisis. A local news crew showed up, and I gave a calm statement. I'm protecting my rights after the HOA harassed me for using my own workshop. Social media exploded. Some called me a rebel, others a jerk ruining the community. Claudia organized meetings, circulated petitions, even tried claiming eminent domain. But her board started cracking. Why had she targeted me without checking the deed? Why risk the neighborhood's value over a shed? At a tense HOA meeting, residents revolted, voting Claudia out 5-2. The new president, Tom Nguyen, called me apologetic. We respect your rights, Lucas. Can we fix this? I laid out my terms. A public apology, legal fee reimbursement, no HOA control over my property, and Claudia barred from leadership. In return, I'd restore creek access with simple rules. Respect my land, no interference. They agreed, sending a signed letter with everything I asked, plus thanks from neighbors who'd learned not to trust HOAs blindly. Claudia sold her house and left town, silent and unapologetic. My workshop hums again, the Mustang's engine purring under my hands. The creek flows free, shared as a courtesy, not a right. As I weld under the stars, I think of Claudia's mistake. She thought power was in rules and intimidation, but it's in knowing your ground and standing firm. So what would you do? Would you bow to a bully with a clipboard or fight back? Have you ever faced someone who thought they could steamroll you? I'd love to hear your stories because I've got more about beating petty tyrants, and I'm guessing you do too.